Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are doing our V Live on a Friday. I was in court. I do expert witness work, as many of you in court testifying this whole week. And when you're doing that, it consumes your life. So we didn't know what it would look like. So we figured to make it safe, we would do it at 2 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and we'll see what we look like for a number of people that show up. We have it looks like one question already, which is awesome. We have some people joining in right now. So welcome, 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 welcome. I hope you are doing awesome. I hope you are having an amazing week and just totally crushing it with your goals, your objectives, and what you want to do. Hi, hi, hi. We're getting a lot of welcomes coming in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So let's kick it right off since we have a question. What role does CISO play in terms of physical security? Typically, physical security is under operations, under it could be under the facilities management or any of those things. Typically, security today doesn't really fit. Sorry, physical security today doesn't really fit under cyber because they're quite different. We saw an effort a few years ago of companies trying to merge them because the logic is the two go together, right? So the idea is if somebody badges into your building, then they shouldn't be VPNing in from the outside. And if somebody is not badged into your building, they shouldn't be logging in from your local network. So the idea would be this would be really cool if you could merge physical security with cyber to be able to add some of those additional protection mechanisms that occur. And then essentially a few companies started trying it, integrating it. And then when the pandemic hit, it pretty much just blew up because now in a lot of cases, there's very little or minimal physical security. Many people are still working from home and there's not as much of it. So that effort sort of distilled. And I just find with most of our clients, most of our companies, even small companies, Fortune 50 companies, the physical security is normally handled by whoever does facilities and buildings and lease. And once again, they go more together. If you're going to be leasing a building or building out new office space, typically cybersecurity is not going to get involved with that, right? IT used to be heavily involved because they had to run wires, but now with wireless and cloud-based security, even IT really doesn't get that involved with the build out of the facility, but physical security does. Right? Physical security has to run the wires for the badge readers, for each of the rooms, for all of the offices, for the video cameras. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. That's much more what we call 2x4s and sheetrock, right? Which is much more tied to a physical security or an operations or a facility management role than it is on cybersecurity. So with most of our clients, those tend to be separate. Those two don't necessarily go together because, yes, they both have security in the name, but they're quite different in how they operate and how they function. And then the question continues, and shadow IT, where users opt for cloud resources without informing the InfoSec department, and how should CISO react to the consequences happen due to the same? So there's an old saying, you get what you tolerate. Right. So to me, it's sort of like a parent come up to me and going, well, my kids are really bad. They don't listen to me. They talk back to me. Right. I tell them they have to be home by 10 o'clock and they don't come home till 2 in the morning. And I go, okay, so what disciplinary measures do you put in place? And they're like, oh, we don't do any of that. I'm like, so do you take away their phone? Do you take away their car or their aids? Do you punish them? Do you put them in timeout? What are you doing to tell them that this behavior is wrong and it's unacceptable? And it's sort of like, well, nothing. And I'm like, and what are you expecting? Right? It's like you're not taking any action. You're sitting there telling them this is unacceptable, but they test you and you don't do anything. So essentially, your mouth is saying, don't do this, but your actions like, go for it. It's good. That's, to me, what happens with most companies with shadow IT. Security always comes to me and goes, they don't listen to us. They're not doing what they're supposed to. They're setting up these accounts. They're doing all this stuff that they shouldn't, all this shadow IT that's happening. If you're not familiar with the term shadow IT, essentially it's where folks set up their own IT. So they'll go to Amazon and set up servers and run websites on them without telling anybody about them. Or they'll go and get new mail accounts and they'll use them for business purposes and they don't tell anybody about it. And my question then goes, well, what action did you take? What disciplinary action? Did you shut it down? Did you turn off their account? Did you basically not approve the expenses? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then what do you expect? To me, shadow IT is nothing more than just a lack of enforcement of security policies and security or a CISO not willing to take action against rogue users. Because to me, shadow IT is real easy to shut down. Work with the accounting and finance department and basically tell them that anything related to IT, cloud, or any other services has to get approved by cybersecurity or IT before you pay them on individual expenses. So like you if your company uses Amazon, you could pre-approve those, but you basically say any individual that's trying to get reimbursed for any of these expenses must go through IT and security. And if they are not approved, if they did not follow the proper procedures, they're not going to get paid. And I'll tell you, that shuts down shadow IT very quickly, because if you're doing shadow IT and the company is reimbursing for those expenses, you are reinforcing bad behavior. And if you go, but Eric, they won't allow that. If an individual does it and the boss goes in and approves it, it's going to be approved. Cybersecurity cannot override it. Great. Update your policy. Your policy says that you tolerate and perfectly allow rogue systems and rogue devices, and shadow IT is fully supported. And whoever signs the expense report is fully liable for all damage to the organization. And you present that to the executive board, and you present that to all of the vice presidents, directors, managers, and anyone with approval authority. You make it crystal clear that if you're signing an expense report and you're allowing this to occur, you are authorizing it and you are fully accepting all responsibility for security, violations, breaches, and exposure. And therefore, you are responsible for any damage to the organization. And then I know some of people always come back going, Eric, we can't do that. I'm like, do you want solutions or do you want problems, right? You have to be willing at some point to stand up and push back if people are not following policies. And one of the most powerful methods, which nobody likes, because you got to remember, most managers, vice presidents, directors like how it is today. And the way it is today in most organizations is they have all the authority, and cyber CISO has all the responsibility. So they don't do what you say, a breach happens and you get fired. They like that. Well, they don't like that you get fired, but they like that they don't get fired. You got to change that. That is a broken model. So if your organization operates that like that, you have to make it crystal clear that we are changing how things are done. If you want to make decisions and you don't want to follow the policy and you don't want to involve security, that's great, but here you go. You now have all the responsibility with all of the authority. And like I said, when you go in and go up to the COOs and CEOs and explain this, it is logical, it makes perfect sense, and they get behind you. But you will get some pushback along the way because, like I said, the other folks don't like that. But you have to have policies that are enforced, and if they're not going to be followed, change the policy and transfer the responsibility and risk to the individual that's not willing to follow the policy. So we got Zach is in the house. I could see CISO services going the way of the law firm, and their expertise will be sought after, and large firms will emerge with thousands of cybersecurity experts' thoughts. Couple things to keep in mind. Even with law firms, companies have a legal department. They still have a legal department. They have a chief legal counsel, and they often will have multiple in-house attorneys working in the organization. And then when they need specialty services, typically to support litigation, they'll then bring in outside attorneys to handle those projects. Now, you could argue in some ways we're there. I know with most of our clients, they have a CISO or somebody in charge of security. They have a small security team that does the routine day-to-day management. And then when they need an assessment, when they need a briefing to the executives, if they have a breach, if they need forensic works done, if they need new policies built out, they'll then bring in outside experts to help and support them on that front. And I would even argue that there are thousands and thousands of companies and cybersecurity experts that do that type of work, right? So I sort of think we're there. It might not be as formalized on the legal front like it is on the legal front, but I think that's pretty much where things are heading and going, because just like with a company, it doesn't make sense to bring on litigation attorneys when you're not going to be in court 24/7, right? They're going to be super busy, and then they're going to be bored out of their mind. Plus, the real reason, if you want to get down to it, is if you're taking a legal, and I just came from a court, so they're very familiar and near and dear to my heart. If you're suing or getting sued, you want the best attorney out there. And I'll tell you right now, the best litigation attorney on the planet is probably not going to come and be in-house counsel, because all they want to do is litigate. They don't want to do in-house counsel work, and you probably can't afford them because these people get paid lots of money, right? If you have a $500 million lawsuit, that person is going to get paid a lot of money if they win that lawsuit. So you're not going to be able to hire them. I would argue that's what's happening now in cyber. A lot of my clients would love to hire me. Two things. One, I don't want to do that. And two, they can't afford me. Right? So in those cases, it's the same thing. They want top-notch experts. So they're going to go out and find those top-notch experts and bring them in to perform that work. So Zach, if I'm missing something in your question, please repost. But I'd sort of say I agree with you, and we're there. Maybe not at the maturity level of law firms who have been around for much, much longer, but I think that's pretty much the model that most of our clients are using and following. How does being skilled as a CISO help me and start run my own company? If you are running a vCISO business, right? If that's the company you're starting, or you're running anything in cybersecurity where you're going to be talking with CISOs, working with CISOs, or solving pain points of CISOs, then it would help you. But if you're telling me you're starting a company selling fashion, right, a restaurant, if you're running traditional services or things, real estate or anything like that, I would say probably doesn't. Yes, if you're starting and running a business, you need to have some basic knowledge of IT and security. But typically, if you're starting a company and it's fairly small in the beginning, you're going to outsource that to a company that provides those services or outsource it to the cloud. So I guess depending on what type of business you're starting, you might not need that skill set. You would only need that skill set if it's the domain of knowledge you're starting the company in. What do you look at when joining a new company or evaluating a company to join? Awesome question. First and foremost is there promotional growth for you within the organization? I would say there's two things that are both tied for first, and I was questioning in my mind which one to cover. So the two that are tied to first in my mind is there growth opportunity? Because you're growing, you want to expand, you want to move into a bigger role, you want to be able to make more money. And if you're coming into an organization where there is no growth, like you're coming in and you're a security engineer with a team of three, and the CISO is in their 40s and have only been there for 2 years, and they plan on staying for 10 years. There's not really a lot of growth there, right? I mean, unless you're going into really unethical, creepy things where you're going to push your CISO in front of a bus or weird or get him kidnapped or weird stuff like that. I'm joking, by the way. If you're new to this, I have a weird sense of humor. But the point is, there's really not a lot of growth opportunity within that type of organization. So that's the first thing I look for. Second thing is the corporate culture. What's the culture? Is it aggressive? Is it fast moving? Is it fast paced? Is it slow? This is where I see a lot of trouble, where it's just the culture of the company put in place by the executive and the employee's mindset are just not a match, right? So some companies are strictly 9 to 5. That's it. Right? You show up at 9, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're at, you leave at 5. Doesn't matter, right? That's the culture. There's others where no, those are core hours, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, but you put in what's required. You should be putting in 45 to 50 hours a week, not 25 to 30. Right? So if you're of the mindset that I just want to do the minimal to get by, and I just want to put in 25 to 30, then you should probably work for a company that only expects that. But if the corporate culture is, listen, you should be available on weekends. If I send you things, you should be able to post them. You should be able to do things in the evening. You should be available and want to buy in and really believe in what the company is doing, then it might be a good match. So you want to get real clear on what you are not expecting, whether you just want a job or whether you want to be behind the mission of what the company's doing and how involved and what are the expectations, the culture, how do they operate, what is the travel, all of those other factors in place. Because if you can't get promoted, you're going to get frustrated. And if there's a misalignment with the culture and what you want, you're going to get frustrated and your boss is going to get frustrated. So as you can tell, to me, the most important part when you're looking for a new company, new opportunity is it aligned with what you want, where you're going, so you don't have frustration? Because frustrated employees are not good for anybody. You want to be happy, you want to be fun, you want to enjoy what you're doing. So those are the main things that I look for. Then a couple of other is, what is the compensation package? Right? How is the company doing financially? Is the company going to be around in 3 to 5 years? Right? What's the viability of the organization? What's their growth model? How do they typically run and operate? Because once again, if you're worth 200K, but the company can only pay you 150, is that really a good move for you? And if they have lost profits or they haven't got funding or things like that over the last couple of years, that's not good either. Right? I sort of laugh because I see people out there that are doing these startups, and they're like, "Yeah, we are one of the top growth companies in cyber. We're worth $2 billion." And I'm like, dude, your company's been around for 5 years. You haven't made a profit, and you're in so much debt, right? Because you keep taking on funding. So great. You might perform some magical calculation that doesn't align with reality to say you're a $1 billion company, but you're not making money, you're not making a profit, and you're basically draining money as quick as you're making it. So the question is, in that type of company, they either get acquired in 2 years or they go out of business. I mean, that's really the reality of it. So the question is, are they giving you enough what we call spiff to make it worth it? Are they giving you enough stock, enough bonus, enough excuse me, enough enough coughing, enough salaries to make it worth it for you to join? So that's really the other piece. The first piece is it a match for what you want, how you work and culture? And then the second, is it financially stable? Are they going to be able to pay you, afford, and be around for multiple years if that's where you choose to be able to stay? Yeah, a couple questions here. Facebook had IT issues and they couldn't open doors. Okay, that's yeah. I mean the two are tied, but the question is who's responsible for which pieces of it. And then yeah, I love shadow IT. It can be really really scary. Hi Eric. What advice can you give to CISOs who believe that they are in highly pressured role where they feel that the entire weight of cybersecurity is on their shoulders? So, first question, is that true? Because the first thing we have to figure out in any situation when I see the words like believe or feel or think, is that really a true statement or is that your perception? So my recommendation would be is why do you believe that to be true? Why do you believe the entire weight of cybersecurity is on your shoulders? What start writing down some facts, some data to prove whether that is or is not true. Then, if it is true, have conversations with your supervisors, your boss or your boss's boss. Listen, here's why I believe the entire weight of cybersecurity is on my shoulders, but here's the part you need to have. What's the solution? How do you suggest to resolve it? So if it's not true, because sometimes we sort of create, I'm not saying this is a bad thing because we all do it, we create scenarios based on our framing or viewing of the situation, and it's not necessarily in line with facts. So I do that sometimes too. Where I'll come in, I'll be like, okay, this contractor is ripping us off, or this person is taking advantage, or whatever it is similar to that, like the pressure situation. And I'll go back and say, okay, is that really true? Do they really know what they're supposed to do? Are they clearly in agreement? If I go back to them and I say, listen, I am paying you X and we agreed to do X, Y, and Z, and you are only doing X. Would they agree with that and say yes? Well, when you brought us on board, you said there were going to be 3 roles, 3 things we're going to do. We started with 1, we added a second, and then you're right, we kept taking the same amount of compensation, but we never added the third in. I do agree with that case. So if it's factual based, would they agree with you on that? And if not, then why don't they agree? Is there a communication breakdown? Was there a communication issue where you weren't clear about what was or wasn't required on it? And then, like I said, if they do agree, then figure out what the solution is. Figure out what the way is to solve this. Do we need more resources? Do we need to go in and reduce my role? And then here's the real key part. Is that going to make you happy? Because I work with a lot of CISOs that say that. They're like, Eric, there's too much pressure. All the weight of the organization is on my shoulders. But guess what? They love that. That's who they are. That's how they get their energy. So I go in, and that's why I learned to ask those questions now, because the easiest solution was when you said that was very easy. Write down all your responsibilities, write down what you want to do. Is that aligned with the current compensation that you're making? And go back to your boss and say, listen, you have continuously put more and more on my shoulders. There's too much pressure. I mean, this is not what I signed up for. This is what you're paying me for. And I'm basically doing the work of three people. This is not fair or appropriate. And I only want to do this role. And often you get it. And then they come back to me and they're like, Eric, I'm bored. I'm miserable. I'm not included. Right? I'm not as busy. And I'm like, you told me that it was high pressured and you didn't want to carry the weight, but it turned out they loved it. So that's the other piece of the equation is, do you enjoy that type of environment? Is that how you get your significance? Because if it is, then it's not a bad thing. If it's a bad thing, then you have to be willing to accept a change. Now, here's the thing to always remember. You always have to be willing to look for another job. You always have to be willing to either quit or get fired. Because if you're not, and you're like, no, Eric, this job is the best. I can't change jobs right now. I can't look for another job. I need to keep this job. Then you're in a position of weakness because you don't have any power to negotiate any findings. People always joke with me, but I always go in and I go, what's the key to a successful relationship? Whether it's a marriage, a job, or anything else. And you know what the trick to a successful marriage is? Divorce is always on the table. You have non-negotiables, and the other person has non-negotiables. And if that person chooses to violate those non-negotiables, then the relationship is over. And I know it sounds harsh. I know it's a bizarre way of looking at it, but it's the only way for both parties to keep power and for both parties to have respect. Because as soon as one person says, no matter what you do, I will stay in this. You could do anything you want. You can do the worst imaginable things against me. You can hurt me. You can do whatever you want, but I will not divorce you under any reason. You lose all your power. You lose all your energy. And it's the same thing in a job. If you're of the mindset that I can't get fired, I won't quit, I have to do anything to stay in this job, then you don't really have a whole lot of power negotiation. So that's the other piece is, are you willing to leave the company? Either voluntarily, you quit, or involuntarily, you get fired. But that's the key piece, because that's the only way you can then have the conversation that I just mentioned and talk about. What advice can you give CISOs who feel they could be fired as a result of a major security incident or data security breach and have issues sleeping at night? So a couple things here. I'm just, by the way, for those listening in, both of those are from the same person. The name is Mubashir. I don't know if that's your name or your handle, but just before I get to that, I'll just read between the lines. It sounds like you need to go in and start doing some things to relax. I have been that way too, where you're always nervous, you're always paranoid, you can't sleep, you're always worried, you things about that. And once again, I'm not a doctor, and there's many degrees here, but I find meditation. I love I've called it fire and ice, where you do 25 minutes of 180-degree sauna followed by a 5-minute ice bath, and you do that 3 times in a row. Flow tanks. It sounds like you have a lot of stress on your back right now, and you need to find an outlet. The gym is another great outlet. Running, exercise, but it sounds like you're so bought into your career, which is good. I admire that, but it sounds like there's a lot of extra stress there that you need to find ways to be able to release and get rid of it within that front. Also, it's not bad to always sort of be looking for a job, because if you have a few jobs offers and you know for a fact that you could leave your current company and get at least a 10% raise and a job that's just as good or better, that takes a lot of stress off also. So that was just an observation reading between the lines on those two questions. The best advice for a CISO so you don't get fired when a breach happens is tell the company you're going to have a breach. The number one issue on why CISOs get fired is because they lied. They told the executives, or they let the executives believe that they're 100% secure. When I talk to every executive when there's a breach and they fire the CISO, I always ask a simple question. Why? You know what they always tell me? Because our metric for success was no breaches. Our CISO promised us that we wouldn't get breached. So therefore, if a breach happens, they failed to do their job correctly, and that's why we fired them. Now, whether you were on board with that or not, whether you knew about that or not, whether they told you about that or not is irrelevant. What's irrelevant is that's what they thought, and you didn't do anything to change it. So, question. When was the last time you talked to your executives about breaches? When was the last time you told them that 100% security doesn't exist? When was the last time you told them, listen, we're going to have a breach? Our job in cybersecurity is not to prevent all breaches. Can't happen, won't happen. Our job in cybersecurity is timely detection and response. We're going to minimize. Now, if we have a breach and we detect it within a few days and we control the damage, I actually expect to be rewarded for that because of the time, energy, and effort I had to put into play. That's actually a good thing. I consider that a positive, not a negative. Now, if we have a breach that we don't detect for 3 years and we have 500 million records stolen, I fully expect you to fire me because that is unacceptable. But I just want to make sure we're on the same page of what is and is not acceptable. So that's how I would handle that, is have the honest conversation with executives. The reason why people typically get fired when a breach happened is because of a misunderstanding. The executives honestly believed that they were paying for, I always say Bugatti level security, and a lot of people are like, what's a Bugatti? So I'll use a Lamborghini or Ferrari level security, but they're only paying for a Honda. Right? They're only paying for a smart car. So you're not going to get that. So you have to have that open, honest conversation with the executives. Next question. What do you think CISO should be considering strategically about the availability of AI APIs? Any new fronts we think that will be used against us by the malicious actors, some of the business value? That's actually a really good question. And I'll share my initial thoughts, but this is one that I've started playing with. Once again, I always sort of tell you the truth of where I'm at. I've heard of ChatGDP. I think we all heard of it. And okay, it is what it is. And I don't really understand the actual interface of it. Great. It's some AI tool that's like Google on steroids that you can ask questions, it'll give answers. Okay, big. Couple weeks ago, a friend of mine was like, dude, you got to see this. And he pulls up his ChatGDP and he starts typing in stuff. And I'm sitting there like, holy moly, Batman, what is going on? Right? I could not believe how good and accurate it was. So to me, my biggest concern as it continues to grow, and yes, Chat GDP does have what they call ethical parameters in it. Not that we did this, not that we did this, but we saw things. But if you put in there, like, how can I kill my boss and not get caught? Right? That I think will be blocked. Now, to be fair, we weren't going that route. He was basically dealing with some issues with his wife. So he was putting in there, how can I seduce and be sexy for my queen? Right? That's actually one of the ones he put in there. And it came back basically that is inappropriate content, right? ChatGPT doesn't promote seducing. And granted, in the context, it probably was okay, but ChatGPT looks out for that. So I was worried and concerned of where that comes ethically. So we actually typed in, ChatGPT, can you give me 3 emails I can send out that would get anybody to open the attachment? And it came back with 3 emails. That wasn't considered, because we didn't use hacking or breaking the law. We just used that wording. And we got back 3 emails that, once again, I'm like, that were freaking good. Like, these were really, really good. These were ones that me or my team probably would click on if we received them, because they're that good. Right? They're that convincing. So yes, with these AI tools, we're entering a whole new realm. And that whole new realm, because you asked how it can be used against us, is basically we're at a point where we have to recognize and accept, listen, people are going to click on links and open attachments in email. It is going to happen. It is a guarantee. I personally think ChatGPT, some people agree or don't agree with me, it's going to cause a lot of problems and issues for people that are in the security awareness business, because security awareness is sort of irrelevant now, because you can raise all the awareness you want, but when malicious emails look identical to legitimate emails, what are you actually raising the awareness on? Don't do anything. Don't use email, right? So to me, we're really at that transition point that I've been saying for a long time, but with the ChatGPT tool, we're here. We need to stop putting the responsibility of security in the hands of the user. They are not going to make right decisions. That's what user awareness is. User awareness is an easy way for security to go, not our problem. We're gonna make it the user's problem. So we're gonna give them awareness. We're gonna teach them how to be super duper smart. And if they click on things or they open things that they're not supposed to, shame on them. We're gonna send them a nasty gram. We're gonna tell their boss they're bad people. We're gonna put something in their HR record, and if they keep doing it, we're gonna fire them. Well, as the sophistication increases of these emails with a ChatGPT, are you prepared to fire your entire company? Because they're going to fall victim. So we're finally at that point where we have to stop putting the responsibility for security in the hands of non-technical people, and we have to make a simple decision. Do we really need attachments and embedded links in email? Is it an absolutely critical part of the company? And before you say yes or no, answer this. Is the risk of compromise, ransomware, extortion worth the benefit of having that feature set in our email system? And to me, seeing companies and what they do and how they do it, no, we shouldn't be allowing that functionality. The analogy I give is, it's like people putting a key under their floor mat, so if they lock themselves out of the house, somebody can still get in. Well, if everybody's robbing your house because they're lifting up the floor mat, the benefit is no longer worth it, right? We need to just not lose our key, Why do we need to come up with other mechanisms for doing that? So to me, absolutely, the AI APIs are changing everything. And what it really is doing is putting pressure on us to stop putting responsibility on the users, stop expecting user awareness to change the problem, because it's great. User awareness works great when you have spelling errors and low sophistication. As you crank it up, the value and benefit starts to go down pretty quickly. So that's when we have to take charge and remove functionality from our systems or products. So we're getting a lot of back and forths and cool comments and things like that. Let me see if there's other questions here. Oh, okay, here we go. Oh, whoa, I skipped way too far. Hold on, hold on. Okay, Eric, did you really program AI at the CIA in the 1990s? Was there AI technology back then? Yes, yes, and yes. Let me tell you, AI or artificial intelligence is not new. It actually has been around as long as computers. AI, let me just break it down. AI or artificial intelligence is, can you set up something to simulate that of an expert? In the 70s, you had AIs at doctors' offices before there were ever computers. If you called a doctor in the 70s or the 80s, what would they? The person who picked up the call would typically transfer you to a nurse practitioner, and the nurse practitioner would read a script. Do you have a headache? Do you have a fever? Are you coughing? Do you have a runny nose? Do you have a sore throat? Do you have diarrhea? Are you nauseous? And each one, their script branches down a different route. And then based on the end, they will sometimes make a conclusion and call in a prescription for you without ever checking with an actual doctor. That's AI. That's called an expert system, which is a form of AI that you're basically just doing a series of if then steps to be able to troubleshoot and determine what is wrong or come up with a solution to a problem. So the ideas of expert systems, where you're capturing the knowledge of experts to be able to go in and perform predictive analysis, that has always been around. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, the concept of neural networks. Neural networks typically only ran on supercomputers, and supercomputers have been around since the 60s. And the whole idea of a neural network is, can you take large amounts of data, feed them into a system so it can do predictive analysis? And what is one of the AI systems that has been around since the late 70s? Every one of you are familiar with it. Every one of you have used it indirectly, and it is the Doppler series AI systems for predicting weather. Back into the 70s, they had one of the early, now it's like the Doppler 3000, but I think it's like the Doppler 100 back then. But that's how they do weather. Do you think a weather person, even in the late 70s and early 80s, manually would process all that data? No. Now it's gotten better. It's gotten a lot more accurate over the years, but essentially they would go in and they would have all this historical data. If this is the temperature, the barometer, the pressure reading, the wind, the humidity, I mean, they'd have like thousands of these settings. They put in a computer and say, when we see this, in 5 days it rains. When we see these numbers, In 5 days, it's sunny. And they just feed in all these predetermined conditions. Then the neural network learns all the patterns. Then you come in and you put in today's current data. And the neural network will spit out that it's most like the data set of rain, or it's most like the data set of sunny. So we've been using AI for a long, long time. It's just now that everyone has computers and the internet and all these other factors and stuff, it's much easier and simpler to be able to access AI or artificial intelligence. But the general techniques of expert systems or neural networks, which is under the category of machine learning, where you're actually learning, you're teaching the machine how to learn based on patterns or data sets, has been around for a while. So I can't give a ton of details, but yeah, that's how I started at the CIA, where I essentially did predictive analysis. So if, let's just say, there's some bad actors that happen to commit a crime in the United States and flee to a country where there's no extradition treaty, and FBI wants to determine how they would respond under certain activity. Because basically, the FBI would like to perform certain activity that would entice this person to relocate to a country where we do have an extradition treaty, so we can meet them at the airport and arrest them and bring them back to serve justice. So I built systems where I worked with law enforcement, psychologists, and others, where I would just gather tons of data from them. Okay, tell me how this person thinks operates. So I would create the parameters of, okay, there's 23 different behavioral aspects. And then I go back to, say, the psychologist and say, okay, give me as much data set as you have. Give me as much data on these 23 and what the action is. And then I would build a neural network and feed it and build a system for them that basically would have a little GUI, and it would ask them the questions. Which of these activities did you observe? And then based on that, it run through a neural network, and it would give them a prediction of what that behavior might be on the system. So it's sort of fun, and the whole idea of AI has always been around. It's just with computers getting faster and better, and really what Chat GDP proves to us, which is what we always knew with AI, the quality of AI is based 100% on the quality of the data and the volume of data. The reason why the weather prediction is so accurate today is because we have 40 years of data every minute of every day. That's like hundreds of millions of data sets. The more data and the more accurate the data, we can predict anything. But imagine if you're predicting the weather and you only have 5 data sets. It's not going to be that accurate. So really, the technology and logic behind ChatGPT and others, it has been around for a while. We just didn't have access to the data. Now, because of the internet and all the cloud-based systems and how the models are set up, now the data is there to be able to support the algorithms to produce very high quality algorithms. Dr. E, are there any virtual style games for upping our games as a CISO, similar to various cybersecurity games, which teach technical, ethical hacking skills, maybe challenge based? I've not seen it. I haven't seen any either. And I think the real reason is it's because it's not really technical based. Right? The ethical hacking stuff you absolutely can gamify because it's really technical. Right? It's really technical in terms of how you do that. But by the way, you got me thinking, Pedro. So thank you, because I'm thinking, going, that's because you're right. People love gamification. So the question is, how can we gamify sort of being a CISO? So, hey, give me a couple months, man. I'll have something out there, right? Give me a little time. I'll build something for you, my friend. But yeah, no, I don't know any out there because, like I said, it's a softer skill. And here's the bigger issue. We're still in a time and place which boggles my mind that we're March 2023, and people still can't agree on what a freaking CISO is. I have very technical cybersecurity people that have been doing this for 15 years that they still honestly believe that a CISO is a technical career track. And they believe that the best CISOs are world-class security engineers that after 15 years transition to a CISO. And I always love it because when they disagree with me, I'm like, so have you ever been a CISO? And they either go, no, or yes, and I hate it. So maybe you're wrong, but they're still going to fight insanity. I'm like, your argument makes no logical sense. You have no valid proof, you have no data, and the data you have says it doesn't work. Right? But it's sort of this ego thing that they want to believe that they're worthy of a C title. So they're going to keep telling themselves the lies. So we can't even get security people to agree and understand what a CISO actually is and what a CISO actually does. So I think we have to figure that out, right, and get universal agreement before we can move on to those other areas. I'm getting pinged by my team because we're supposed to be about 45 minutes and I ran way over, but I was having such a good time with everyone and these questions were amazing. I actually lost track of time. So I think I got to all the questions, but thank you. And keep checking social because we'll be here next week. I don't know the time or place, but I always love spending time with you. I hope you're finding a lot of value. Only thing I ask is share the message. Let other people know about my podcast, let other people know about my YouTube Live, and have an amazing weekend and an amazing week. And we'll see you in about 5 to 6 days. Thank you so much and take care.